airlines that are requesting, for instance, minimum revenue guarantee, because by law, Martinique being a European, I would say, island on top of being French, we are obliged to follow the European rules, and we cannot do risk guarantee for airlines. And we are sometimes struggling, and we wanted to learn from you how we could, work differently, not using that specific tool. And I would say that knowing that with this crisis, airlines will more and more ask for this type of financial tool, and knowing that our different governments won't be able to support only airlines, because we are supposed to support other, I would say, industries, due to the impact, financial impact of this pandemic on the different, I would say, industries in our different islands. So that is my question. How do we do now? Okay. Because we have to support all the different segments of the economy in our island, and not only the airline part.
Thank you.
Sorry, which kind of guarantee? Which kind of guarantees? Airline
usually that you have to pay. You have to pay if the load factor is below a certain level, so you have to pay for the empty seats. So basically, the airlines, they don't have anymore to focus on whether or not the route will be performing. They will just care about how much money they will get to perform the line. And I would say that before, it's something that I think that could be activated, I would say, kind of easily for those markets that are not abiding by the very restrictive European laws that we have right now. But I would say that we are in a situation where we have a lot of different industries that are requesting support from the state. So meaning that it's not only the airport industry or airline industry that we have to support. We have to finance different industries, and meaning that we cannot, focus only on airlines. So the question is that how could we? What are the best practices to work differently, and to find new financial tools to work with airlines, and especially those tools if they are applicable within a European frame, legal frame.
Okay.
Let me.
Gustavo, one question before you proceed. Are you recording this this meeting? I think it is very good to record it so that we can, after the meeting, go through all the requests and issues so that we can pinpoint what we are going to do the next one.
As soon as Valerie started speaking, we started recording this meeting, yes.
Okay.
Yes, all around the world right now, it's a tension between airlines, airports, and government in terms of guarantee or support, because in general in the world, governments are supporting airlines, specific and particularly, they are not supporting airports. So according with the states, the tools that government are using are different in part of the world and according to the economy. One thing is in Germany with Lufthansa, and another thing is in UK with British Airways, for example. So I think that ACI, the Airport Policy International, published a list of many tools that government can help or can take for helping airlines and for helping airports in this crisis time. So, but despite that, I took the notes and I will try to think about how can we help with for doing an agenda for our future next meeting or so, okay?
Good. Now, Diego, allow me to, I know Andre is more in the IT area, and let me pass it over also, we'll come back to you, Marvin, so that I follow the order I have on the screen. Marvin, I believe you're more involved in the HR, right? On the Human Resources Department at St. Vincent. Would you like to take a few moments to let us know what you think? How can we help you things? What do you see?
Okay, so this pandemic has directly affected health and safety, whether it's for our employees or passengers or crew. And one of the challenges that we now face is that we have to get additional personal protective equipment for employees. Grooming standards for the airlines, they are more strict, they have increased the standards required. And all of this is at an additional cost. So we've seen worldwide price gouging because everybody wants the same things. Now, the pandemic has affected our revenue. How do we recover the costs for these additional PPE when we're hardly making any money? But it's something we have to do because we have to protect our employees, we have to protect our borders, and we have to protect our population.
Thank you. Thank you, Marvin. As Rangelo mentioned, we are recording all this, so it will be easier for the three of us later to analyze and come back to you with some ideas. But in the meantime, if anybody has anything to say, please jump in. So let me pass it over to Andre. Andre, I believe you're more involved in the IT area, right?
Yeah, I am. So I think, you know, it's kind of related to what Marvin talked about in terms of the price gouging and so on. What we've noticed is that there's a lot of persons reaching out to try to sell new products that that they think that we would need in the pandemic, and we're looking at moving into a lot of software is moving into the cloud as well. So the questions that kind of come up are, one, what are the ways that we can, you know, protect ourselves and our data as if we're looking to move into the cloud? And two, what are some ways that I guess we could protect ourselves in this new era where persons are, I guess, able, it's basically becoming a green field. So your pricing can vary widely. And in fact, if you don't list your prices publicly, you could charge AIA one price and then you could charge Granby Adams a different price. So I think that was one of the things that an organization like this could assist with in preventing some sort of price gouging or similar sorts.
Interesting. Do you have, how is your legislation about data protections? Do you GDPR?
Right. So we have a Cyber Protection Act. And I know that the government is working on a revision to that to kind of more align it to the region as a whole. But right now, it's not very robust in that way, in terms of protecting information on the cloud. So that's where we are with that.
Okay, because the data right now is one of the most important issue, more before the pandemic, because the touchless airport or the touchless journey is a new, it's a new paradigm within the industry. So I think that from this point of view, in Guala, we used to pay attention in the past to data analytics and data protection. But I think that this is in the future will be one of the big picture for everyone, for passengers, for airline, for airport operators, and for regulators as well. So I will take note particularly of this matter.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andre. Now, let me, if you don't mind, Nicole, just so that everybody else knows, I believe you are the legal counsel at Kingston Airport in Jamaica. Is that correct?
Gustavo,
Yes.
Diego?
One general question. In the Caribbean area, there are no uniform legislation in this kind of topic. Do you have a Commonwealth, or every single island is a country with its own particular legal system? It's not. This is a question, just in general.
Well, in the Caribbean, it depends. All of the English-speaking countries basically are common law jurisdictions, but we don't have a unified legal framework. It came from England, but it's developed. All the countries are independent. The French islands are a bit different because they're really treated as overseas departments of the European country, and so their legislation, I think, is probably straight from France, and they're regulated by European Union. But the English in the English-speaking Caribbean, it's all independent, and every country is different, basically.
Oh, okay, but the civil law is more or less similar in one each other. For example, in Latin America, and the civil law are very, very similar between Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, Brazil as well, or Uruguay and Chilean. The civil law is very, very, very similar. The Caribbean country used to have similar acts or legislation, or are completely different according to your culture or according to your system. Just to take an idea of the problem, I'm trying to say if the airport law or the aeronautical act are similar, or they are very different one each other. This is what I'm trying to understand.
I think it's different in every country, as Nicole just said. It's depending on if you are a part of another kingdom or not, and also on how you independently develop your own legislation. In our case, for example, Curacao is part of the Dutch kingdom. We are part of the Dutch kingdom, but our law is almost similar to the Dutch law, to the law in Holland, but also developed based on our territory. So we are part of the Dutch kingdom, but we are autonomous in the kingdom.
Okay,
it's clear. I understand.
Nicole, just going back to you so that you can express whatever you have. You are representing GAP Airports from Mexico as operator of Kingston Airport. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. So we're a private operator who is a concessionaire of the airport here in Kingston, and we are a subsidiary of GAP, which is Grupo Aeroportuario del Pacifico, which is a Mexican-based airport operating company. There are 14 airports in the group, 12 in Mexico and the Kingston, and we are a majority shareholder of the airport in Montego Bay as well. So I used to work on the government side, and I've transitioned to the private operation side. And I just, as a general comment, I agree with the whole notion that there isn't a sort of very well developed framework for airports so much. The government even though the government used to operate both airports, both international airports in Jamaica, and still operates domestic aerodromes, the airport law, the legislative framework for airports is not as strong. So there's an Airport Economic Regulation Act, which was passed in 2003 when government moved towards privatizing the airports in Jamaica. And so we sort of operate kind of in a bit of a hodgepodge, because there's the Civil Aviation Law and Regulations, and then there's this Airport Economic Regulation Act. And as the title suggests, it's really limited to economic regulation. So our concession agreements become very much the framework in which we operate. We have found that in the present crisis, that the concession agreement really does not sufficiently address the kind of situation that we are in now, and so we are having to kind of make it up as we go along as to how certain things will be dealt with, because it's not clearly spelled out in the concession agreement, and there isn't a legislative framework per se to deal with the broader issues of the airport operation as opposed to just economic regulation.
Yeah, I see many faces nodding at the same time, saying, "Yeah, that's the same for
Yes,
us."
because the airport acts or airport law are not common in our country, but see the aeronautical code or civil aviation law or air laws. So in the case of the concessions contract, it's very important how the administrative law complement, or the civil law, all depend, complete the framework for understand the problem that the concessionary or the airport operator used to face. So this is a matter. For example, the airport operator has not limits of liability in case of damages, as airline has in case of accident or damages as well, considering the international legal framework of the Montreal Convention, for example. It's not applied to airport operators. For saying one thing. So this is different between airport law and air law. And in terms of concessions contract, the operator has this problem that Nicola was saying, that there is only the contract and no other additional law for solve the problem. So this is a problem. So
right. And the
I have
other
to
issue,
discuss a lot about that.
right. And the other thing too, I think from my perspective, from the common law jurisdiction perspective, there has also not been much litigation with respect to airport concessions, where you could look to previous court decisions or precedents for understanding how the terms of the concession would be interpreted and applied. So it is very much a operator to government negotiation for everything that's not specified in the concession agreement.
That's exactly what we are going through as well.
So,
yes.
No, Nicole, thank you, because I think you're very, very good at pointing out what's going on. Now, let's assume, before we go maybe to Amy or to Kieran from Trinidad, let's assume we have a second Zoom meeting with this group, and let's say we do it in 2 or 3 weeks' time so that we have time to prepare. Will there be one specific topic that you would like to be addressed in this second meeting? Can you think of something that in particular could be of great use for you and maybe to share with some of the people here? There you go.
Well, I don't know. I thought this is what had popped up in my mind at the time, and I was debating whether I should say anything about it. But one of the challenges that we have as an airport operator is just obtaining insurance, airport owners and operators liability insurance. It's the market. I don't know if you're aware, the market has contracted very much in that area. Some of the players have left the reinsurance market for airports, and so it's an area of challenge. And as you said, because there's no limitation on the liability for airports, it can become something that's very expensive and an area that maybe we can look at and see how maybe through lobbying or whatever we could move something forward for airports.
That's a specific. Thanks for your very, very straight input. That's an area that we can definitely work on, and including we can bring in specialists from all over the world, Diego, because that's an area that WALA works a lot with in terms of insurance.
Definitely. Yes, I will. Yes.
Now, not to make it too long, let me give the opportunity. I don't know, Amy from St. Lucia, if you are able to give us some feedback, or else in the meantime, oh, Kieran from Trinidad, are you? Yeah.
Hi. Well, for me, I think we've had, because of the economic fallout and just, the direct effects of the pandemic, we've had a number of situations where tenants and a number of our concessionaires, etc., have been asking for things in terms of deferrals of rent and all of these issues, financial issues in terms of their difficulties in making payments, etc. And I was just wondering how other entities sort of approached it. Where we are at now, one of the ways that we sought to look at it is with respect to our minimum annual rent, so our variable rent. We would have pegged it at what we expect projections to be at in the future. So we've sort of come up with some figures that we anticipate when we get to a certain level of passenger movement that's acceptable. And before we get to that level, we've implemented certain percentages of rent on the minimum annual. So that was one approach that we took, but I'm really interested to find out what approach other airports are using in terms of dealing with a lot of these issues for persons who are, talking about, other than saying, okay, you have to leave, because I mean, we all recognize that there's an issue, right? So other than that, what are the other, mechanisms and so on that persons are using to treat with that issue?
That is great, and that's another of the things that has come up quite often. We, as I said before, I don't want to repeat myself, but we are recording all this so that we can later analyze it and come back to you with something very specific. But it's good to hear from all of you. I don't know if you can, Glenda, I don't know if you can listen to us. There you go.
Hi, hello everybody.
I know.
Hi, hello.
I believe you're in marketing and PR department. Is that correct?
Right. I just wanted to make a small comment on the idea of concessionaires. So far, we have been given our concessionaires a 100% waiver in the first instance from April, May, and June, the first instance, and now July, August, September, another 100% waiver. After September, I'm not sure, what's going to happen. I realized that in Trinidad, she mentioned that the minimum rent was tagged to a particular number of passengers. But in our case, I mean, we had very little traffic. So, I mean, that formula wasn't even practical. There was just no business to make it significant to hold the concessionaires responsible for a value. So going forward, especially now as we are projecting for 2021, we're preparing our budgets, and between January and July, I mean, the revenue is almost 50%. I am not even sure how to go about projecting for 2021. I don't know how your budgets in the other airports, how you're doing your projections for 2021, because we just have no idea what the situation will be like the first quarter, the second quarter, or where do we go from here? So that's one concern for me. And so far, the way we've been dealing with concessionaires is just to give them 100% waiver for the last 6 months. And secondly, my other concern has to do with the ownership of information about the pandemic, or maybe any other pandemic, any other crisis that has to be disseminated by the airport. We know that the ultimate ownership of information related to health matters for the country lies with the Ministry of Health. And if they have a particular task force assigned to that crisis. But from an airport standpoint, we are bombarded with passengers asking us information through social media on a daily basis. And also the protocols are under constant review. So they change practically every week. And we also feel that we have a responsibility to put that information out there. So sometimes I wonder about liability in relation to information that goes out about protocols and so forth. And we try to ensure that that information, you know, goes out as if it's coming from the Ministry of Health, from the officials, but we are just facilitating it. So that's also a question that I have in my mind.
Very interesting.
Thank you very much. And I think it's almost an hour, but am I forgetting anybody that would like to share any comments? Whether you already spoke or not, doesn't matter. Would anybody else like to share something?
Okay, this is Amy from St. Lucia. I am not a lawyer. I am from Air Traffic Services, but I happen to have been involved very much in the process of protocol development. And to answer, I think is Kay Whittington from Trinidad. We did a similar thing at in St. Lucia. At first, we had a moratorium on rentals and in our case, it's very difficult because we run both the seaports and the airports. We're a statutory board created by the government and with some level of independence, but at the same time, we're a creature of government. And so initially what we did for our concessionaires was a moratorium, I think for the period April, May, June. Afterwards, this moratorium turned into a waiver, a total waiver of 100%, I think, of the fee. So April, May, June, and I think we went to percentages for June, July, and I think August. We have since officially opened business from July 9th, at least the airports. The seaports are open, but it's cargo and maybe just repatriation of persons from Martinique, Guadeloupe, as the case may be, on ferries and small yachts. But in terms of the airport, we'd say we're back in terms of business, and so we believe that the concessionaires can pay something, some rent at this time. The issue for us also is that we are a creature of government, and then of course you have, I think, to the point of the MRGs, the minimum revenue guarantees that were mentioned earlier, and we do have airlines approaching the government and asking the government for waivers of their fees and taxes, and that the case may be. And to us, it's difficult because we are the operator and of the airports and the seaports, and sometimes now we feel like we're a charity service, so to speak, you know, because everything is a waiver, and so you want to run a business, but at the same time, there are political interests and also business interests in terms of, I think, an attempt is being made, especially in the Eastern Caribbean, between Barbados, St. Lucia, and the other islands, to create this business. So I think what the governments want to do is to say, cut down certain costs for the airlines. And that, and you're hoping at the same time, I suppose, that passengers will come in and hopefully the money will come in. But that's what has been happening. I think the businesses, of course, is down quite a bit from last year. And to the point of Ms. Forswaffers, yeah, we are not seeing, we operate on zero budgets, and then we are projecting, and we are not sure because we think the times are very uncertain. Our first phase in terms of reopening is supposed to end at the end of this month, and we are supposed to go into a new phase in October, and we're not certain that new phase will start, although we have heard recently that CARICOM made a decision as to creating a bubble of Eastern Caribbean states where persons should be able to travel freely without COVID testing within that bubble. But to that point, that hasn't happened in St. Lucia as yet, although we are part of that CARICOM decision apparently. And based on what I was told by very high level person at the Ministry of Health, that a CARICOM conclusion is not law. So the law in St. Lucia still remains that everybody coming into St. Lucia requires a test. And so that hasn't changed. So that's where we are in terms of the uncertainty. But in terms of managing so far the crisis, so to speak, so far, so good. I think we have a very strong female team, I would say, in St. Lucia, which has, I hate to do this, but I have to do it because I'm kind of proud, very proud of them. And we have our chief medical officer. We have our task force is pretty much led by 4 women, the PS in the Ministry of Tourism. And then I think we have a lawyer from the government department of finance, and we have from the Attorney General's office. And those persons have been allowed to run the response since March. And it, at least the response so far has gotten very well. As to these other issues in terms of the monies and how we are going to survive in terms of a tourist country going forward, that's still up in the air.
Well, thank you very much for the general update. Now it's been over an hour, and I noticed that some need to leave or maybe have other meetings. So, Roangelo and Diego, to wrap it up, I would say the following. Of course, thanks for everybody to participate for your participation. Most important, you already know each other. We will be sharing your emails so that you can get in touch with them on a one-to-one basis. But Roangelo and Diego, if you agree, maybe we take a couple of days to analyze this recording in depth, and then we suggest to the group a second meeting, just addressing a specific issue or a group of specific issues, or inviting a distinguished speaker. I don't know. Do you think that's right?
I think it's a good idea. I agree on that.
Diego?
Yes, I really found this conversation. I found this conversation very useful for me, very interesting. There is a lot of topic and issue for discussing and to know. And I think that from Walla we can help and support this group with experts and with people around the world, and technicians or airport operator from the regulator side. I'm very happy. Go ahead. We have a meeting in the following days.
Good. So
I think if of course they agree to share their emails, of course.
yes, I think I mentioned that. I think, and if anybody wants to get an email from somebody that's not in the list, let us know and we'll make the connection. But I think that is essential. So you want to close it, Roangelo, or so that's...
Go ahead. Thank you for your time, everybody. I really appreciate and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to get in contact with each other. I think that is the genesis, this is the beginning of something very useful.
Absolutely. Right. So thanks again for the faces that we know each other. Nice to see you again. For the new ones, very nice to meet you. And we'll be in touch for a second meeting in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Excellent. Bye. Thank you. Be safe. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.